All right. As people are starting to sign in, welcome to our Creating a Successful MIT EMBA Application webinar. Ready to get started when you are, Sarah? Great, fantastic. All right, my name is Andy Leibel. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions. I work with candidates from submitting their application through the interview process and onboarding once they're admitted. I also advise students while they're in the program as well. I'll be joined today by my colleague, Sarah Massey. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Massey. Really excited to be here tonight. I also, with Andy, work in the admissions process. The main area where I work and drive throughout the year is everything that leads up until the first day of class. And then, like Andy, I play a supporting role once students matriculate in the program. Great.
Today's agenda is to provide an overview of the MIT Executive MBA and the community before providing you with some insight on how to prepare a successful application. As always, we also want to leave time to answer your questions. Before we talk about the program, I'm going to take a second just to explain our mission. MIT, MIT Sloan, and the Executive MBA program are all deeply mission-driven, and it drives almost everything we do. As a part of the world-class research institution, MIT Sloan plays a vital role in turning innovation into real-world organizational capabilities. The mission of MIT Sloan is to develop principled, innovative leaders who improve the world and to generate ideas that advance management practice. The Executive MBA offers a distinct opportunity by allowing students to immediately apply their learning in real-world contexts. And the mission of the MIT EMBA is empowering and connecting leaders to redefine our shared future. The MIT EMBA is a 20-month experience in which you will earn the same MBA as the two-year traditional MBA program. The distinction lies in the format of our program and the cohort itself. Students travel to campus for 26 class weekend sessions held every 2 to 3 weeks. We consider a weekend Friday and Saturday. Additionally, there are 4 week-long modules spaced about every 6 months within the program and one international week-long project that takes place around mid-March of your final year. Now let's take a look at how the cohort is made up. This data is pulled from the class of 2026, but these numbers remain fairly similar year over year. Imagine yourself in a classroom of 126 to 130 global executive leaders. The average years of work experience in the class is 17, and the average age of our students is 41. 65% of the class is non-local, meaning they come from outside of Massachusetts every class weekend to participate on campus in person. About 76% of our class is at a responsibility level of director or above. 61% of the class hold an advanced degree of some kind, which is a JD, MD, a PhD, or a master's. But the one thing that 100% of our students have in common is that they are, all of them, employed full-time. Within the class, we have a wide range of industry representation. These top 4 bullets are usually the main industries represented, but the percentages will sometimes change year over year. Currently, software and technology is the #1 industry represented in the class of 2026, but the year before in class of 2025, it was financial services and banking. And if you think back to what was happening in the world around the time when people are applying, that is what's kind of affecting what industries are represented in the top spots. For instance, in the class of 2023, they would have been applying in 2021, and the #1 industry was healthcare. More importantly, though, we want to look at the category of other, which makes up the largest portion of the class. This includes industries such as consumer goods, entertainment, energy, management, manufacturing, nonprofit, and many more. This is important, diverse representation that provides valuable perspective to every class discussion. As mentioned before, 76% of the class is at the director level of above, but that means that 24% are at manager level or individual contributor level within their organizations holding strategic roles. Entrepreneurs might also be interested in seeing that 10% of our class are made up of full-time entrepreneurs. Our students work in organizations that range from large enterprises with more than 10,000 employees to companies with as small as fewer than 25 employees. There is no right company to come from because any company you have worked for will have contributed to your unique experience and perspective. Our community is diverse geographically as well. More than half of the cohort travel from outside of the northeast of the United States to be here in person. 16% are specifically traveling from outside of the US altogether to attend classes on campus. Our international students join us from countries as close as Canada to as far away as France, Colombia, the UAE, South Africa, Vietnam, and many more. All right, now that we've talked about some of the diverse perspectives of the cohort, let's talk about what attributes our students have in common and what the admissions committee will be looking for when they're reviewing. Every MIT EMBA student should have a strong basis of professional experience, or as we like to put it, at least 10 years or more of work experience. They should possess leadership responsibility within their role. This might be managing a business, division, or department, often with the responsibility of budget, strategy, or people development. We also want to see candidates that are quant comfortable. Now, this does not mean you need to be a mathematician by any means, but we do look at your transcripts for a course in statistics and a course in calculus with grades of B or better. It's important to remember that these courses are not a barrier for entry, this prerequisite requirement, but it's a tool to set you up for success within the academic rigor of our core curriculum. If you don't already have these courses on your application, we do recommend that you try to enroll in one now to strengthen your application. Additionally, we will look for organizational support. It is important that your company understands the commitment of the program, supporting your time on campus and your journey. Because of our emphasis on action learning, your organization will need to be aware of what you're taking on. And finally, beyond these attributes, we want to talk about what the ideal candidate will have. The ideal candidate is an innovator who likes to challenge the status quo. This means combining thought leadership with strong performance, global perspective, and of course, innovation. Our candidates will enter the admissions process with their application, but this will be followed by the next phase, which is an invitation to interview. And then finally, there is a final review from our admissions committee. Now I'd like to turn this over to Sarah to talk more about this application.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andy. All right, so I hope that a lot of you joining today may have already seen our application. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the nuts and bolts of it, right? At a really high level, we ask kind of the typical things that you would expect. You'll submit a resume and transcripts. There will be essays that you can find the details of on the link that Andy shared on that last screen. Find that right on our website and look at the application directly. What we're going to spend more time on today are talking about how to think about the application as a whole. And that's the written component as well as the interview, as the interviews, kind of what you want to be highlighting and how you want to think strategically. about what you're presenting. So with that, let's kick it off with some do's and don'ts that we've observed over the years working with thousands of people going through the process. So the first one is demonstrate leadership impact. You're going to, as you're looking at the first step of the application, which is the written component, you have a collection of essays. Each one will ask a really specific question. Think about the collection of all of them, right? We will read from cover to cover. So think about the whole picture, including the resume and everything that we see. Is the committee going to be able to get a sense of your ownership of high stakes decisions, some measurable outcomes, right? Including some numbers and change, right? What happened, not just what the situation was. We're interested in influence with and without authority, right? Those are you probably hold a little bit of both in your role, and we're interested in both types. And leadership across functions, geographies, and systems. So that's really the breadth that you're working in. And a tip for you is to focus on not just what happened and what the situation was, or even maybe what you did, but what changed because of you. So you will do that. Don't over-index on the prestige, right? The brand name, the brand name of your organization or your school, a lot less important than the impact that you've had. Resume style essays, I think of more as lists of responsibilities, lists of accomplishments that aren't telling the story of how and why. Role descriptions instead of decisions, right? And so that's shifting a little bit more to the action side of things. And I think that last bullet is very much like the first, the brand names without impact. It's kind of that assumption that the pedigree is the differentiation. We are a pretty low ego and grounded place around here. I think of MIT as a first name sort of place. And so the pedigree is a lot less important than what it is that you're working on and doing. So the essays are a place for you to tell the story of your career, the story behind your career. And so that's going to be a lot more interesting than the titles and the organization names. All right, so you do want to show us how you're thinking. This I've been alluding to along the way. It's the whys. So, we at MIT care a lot about analytical reasoning and the judgment. You in management, if you're already in a senior position, that you have to, whether you started out this way or not, become comfortable with ambiguity and making trade-offs. And so we want to be able to see how you navigate in situations where there are ambiguity and trade-offs. We're looking for people with an ability to reframe problems and to learn, right? And to learn from failure, learn from iteration. There is no perfect, smooth path. It is wonderful when you can learn academically and not have to learn every lesson the hard way. But those failures that you do have and the tough patches, what have you learned from them and how did you move forward? So we do want to know not just the result. I have told you to tell us about the results, but also why did you choose a particular path, right? And so this is very much about your thought process. While you're doing that, don't play it safe. Applications that don't stand out are the ones with really generic leadership stories. They might be polished and well written, but there isn't a unique story there. I was talking as we were preparing for this for this session tonight. I was chatting with an alum from our program about his application experience, and he said he wrote his first version of his essays, showed them to his wife, and she said, "You need to rewrite all of these. They don't sound like you." She gave him fantastic advice, right? And that is really something to think about. You might have a couple of drafts along the way, but make sure that you're not that you aren't losing your own voice in pursuit of the perfect application. Your personality should shine through, your personality and your own, your own circumstances. If you read it and you think someone else could have possibly written this essay or someone else could have possibly been in this scenario, then it's not personal enough, right? It's not specific enough. We want to see your point of view. And so for that, we respect intellectual courage, thoughtful dissent. That doesn't mean dissent for dissent's sake, but thoughtful dissent and original thinking. So make sure, don't hold back from actually revealing that element or that aspect of yourself. We do want to see your evidence of your self-awareness too. So it's okay to be honest, and even a really positive sign for us to be honest about your own gaps and limitations. We will look for evidence of growth and adaptability. You don't start out, you didn't start out where you are now. And so it's about that path and journey, how you got there. We want to build a class full of people who have enough confidence, but not high ego, right? I think of this as a pretty low ego place, and we'll really be looking for that throughout the application process as well, right? We're thinking of building a community. And so, share your reflection on your own leadership evolution, right? Not leadership in general, but your own evolution. And so my tip to you is be ready. If you come in for an interview, if you're invited in for an interview, be ready to explain the types of challenges that you still struggle with, something you're still working on now. You're here to grow, so we don't expect you to walk in the door perfect. And don't ignore the cohort. This is, we're looking for people who will contribute to peer learning. The community here of Andy talked a lot about the what your cohort and will look like. But behind all those numbers are a really strong community of individuals who will be spending a lot of time together, working together, and really, when we do our job well and build the right balanced cohort and balanced team, you are making each other better, right? So pay attention, make sure to think about what you can contribute to your peers. We absolutely demand respect for diverse perspectives. And we're looking for collaborative leadership styles and that mindset of thinking about the community, thinking bigger than yourself about the impact that you're having. So the cohort is a big part of your experience. This doesn't necessarily need to be the explicit thing that you're saying in your application, but whether you're saying it directly or not, as you read through your application, what would we take out? What would the committee be able to see about your community mindedness? And we do have one essay in the application specifically asking about your community mindedness. So that's one place where you can showcase that. As we're talking tonight, I want to pause just for a minute to remind everybody that we have a Q&A that this will be a dialogue. So for those of you that are here with us now, really we're taking the time tonight to talk directly with you, to answer your questions as you're preparing, especially if you're thinking about an application this year, or even if you're in here and you're thinking about a year or 2 years down the line. As you're thinking about the application, throw any questions you have into the Q&A, and Andy and I will try to answer as many as we possibly can tonight. So you can start throwing those in now. I do have a few more things to go through, but you can start throwing those questions in now. It's just a little button in the Zoom. Okay, we've talked about the cohort and what you can bring to the cohort experience. Another thing that you really want to think about are your recommenders. They do play a significant role in your application. We require 2 letters of recommendation, and they each serve a very distinct purpose. So we'll ask for one general recommender, and that can be anyone you have currently work with, or have worked with in the past. Usually you'll choose a former manager, current or former manager, or somebody, a mentor from your career, someone who's worked with you, usually someone who's, someone who's been more senior or more of a mentor position for you. And then the second recommender should be a current supervisor or superior, right? It's someone in your current line of reporting. Usually it's either, usually it might be your skip level boss, could be your direct boss, could be HR, right? But it's got to be that it's essentially that official organizational support, because during the 20 months, Andy described the schedule and a little bit about the action learning, right? You're going back on Monday and applying the learning and taking ideas from MIT and applying them to your work and then repeating that cycle. Um, and so because your organization is such an integral part of the educational sphere here, we need someone who can talk about over the next 20 months, how will the organization be supporting you, right? So the organizational support recommendation speaks about the present and the future. The general recommenders speak about the past. We're going to ask them questions more about that. So my tip to you, when you're requesting your letters of recommendation, look at the specific questions for each recommender type. And there's a URL right here. You can find it on our website where you can see the questions we will be asking them and set a meeting with them to discuss those topics, right? They're going to be writing the letter, but they'll do a much better job if you've been able to talk to them about your goals. And I do see we have one question in the chat that's on this topic, so I may as well in the Q&A that I may as well ask now. The question is it wise or is it possible to have more than 2 letters of recommendation? It is possible, but in most cases, it's not necessary and not additive. So in the rare circumstance where you have maybe a sort of third element to your career. So perhaps you have one recommender who's been a mentor in your career, one who is in that current organizational support role, but then perhaps you have something you're really involved in the community that is kind of separate from your professional career, but that is significant, has included significant leadership from you. Perhaps you're on the board of a nonprofit or something like that. And so maybe a letter of recommendation from that area, or you're on the local government or something like that. Perhaps a letter of recommendation from that area then would be additive, but in most cases, a third is not necessary. Okay, good. One final thought on the application process as a whole. We are really looking less for you to be impressive, and we're really thinking more about impact. Be impactful, be thoughtful, be real. We want to see how you lead, how you think, and for you to show us why you want this particular degree rather than tell us, right? So if you're describing the challenges you're working on, if you're showing us your career path, right, we'll be able to, and talking about your goals, your upcoming goals for impact, we'll be able to make the connections to the program and how we would be able to help you get there. So that showing, not telling, goes a long way. Our upcoming application deadlines are April 2nd for round 4, and then our final deadline is May 7th. Those are both Thursdays. If your application is complete by that date, you'll have your final decision from us on the date posted there. We do accept late applications between May 7th and June 1st. It's a little bit more as space, it's a little bit more as space is needed. So if you have the option to go earlier, it's to some benefit for you. But we will kind of leave a little bit of wiggle room at the end for those who maybe find us a bit later. This URL here, if you're screenshotting, will take you to the application directly. Okay, so now we're just going to talk about your questions. I see one in here in the Q&A that is about the recommendation. So I'll follow up on the recommendations. All right, so if you pick your manager and then someone from your reporting line, say your manager's manager, does that give you a complete picture? There may be some overlap, or is that okay? Yeah, that is really okay. It would be fine to go have both of your recommenders from that vertical. What I would suggest is that at least one of them has some, has known you for some length of time or has worked with you across some length of time, right? That's your general recommender. You want to be someone who has worked with you for a while and has observed enough examples of how you work with others, how you navigate new ideas and organizational change. Because that letter or the questions that the general recommender will receive are a little bit more focused on things that they have observed from the past. The organizational support letter is going to be more about how the organization is supporting you over the upcoming 20 months. And I don't mean financially supporting, although if they are wonderful, you should certainly look into it. But really supporting in terms of the time, flexibility if that is needed, right? And opportunities for growth and application. Hope that answers that question. And then I have another question about the for international students. And you may have noticed on Andy's chart, somewhere around 16% of students in our recent class were international and living internationally. So they were all on, right? Those students are on F1 visas. MIT will work with you after you're admitted to on the F1 process. So we essentially, our international students office will work really closely with you on getting that visa. If you are an international student and so you will be needing that visa, I recommend applying as early as possible. So by that April, apply by that April deadline. That will give you the best opportunity for receiving a decision in time to apply for the visa and go through that process. It can take months right, from the time that you submit your application to being admitted, there's a bit of a gap, but once you're admitted, the visa process can take a while as well. So you want to give yourself a little bit of extra time if you might need the F1 visa. Good, and I'm happy to talk about that if you have any other questions about the international student experience. Quick question. If I use AI to help brainstorm my application essays, does that count as innovation? Asking for friends. Good. I like humor in your question. And I actually think so what we don't want is AI is writing your essay completely and it's a generic essay and it's not really, representing either your thought process or your lived experience. We don't explicitly ban you, right? We don't prohibit the use of AI. I'll brainstorm with AI. I'll use AI as a writing partner in a lot of things, right? But you don't want to submit it as your own work or your story if it's not representing you. So absolutely use tools and then present yourself authentically of wow, what I love is, yes, AI helped me write this question. So, what you're doing there is being really transparent. And that's what we want to see in the application. A little bit of humor, a little specificity, and transparency, right? Kind of citing your sources.
I can take the next one, Sarah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So we have two questions here about the GMAT and GRE. Is it required as part of the application and would it strengthen your application? So I'm just going to say it outright. No, the GMAT and GRE are not required of the application. But if you do have those scores and you would like to submit them, there is space in the application to offer them as supplemental materials. The admissions committee is going to review your application holistically. So pairing that with your transcripts to show your quantitative comfort level might be of a benefit if you have those scores already.
Perfect. Thanks, Andy. Let's see. We've got a good question here. How can I guide my mentor to write an exceptional letter of recommendation? What should my mentor talk about in the letter and what aspects of my candidature is needed? It's a good question. And actually we want to make this transparent and straightforward for you. So on our website, we actually have the list of questions that we will be asking your recommenders. So if it's your mentor, I'm guessing that you're talking about the general recommendation letter. And I recommend you actually send them the link to, well, they'll get those questions directly from us, but you should go visit the website, look at what those questions are. If you've not submitted your application yet, those questions are, right, it's just a bullet point list that you can see on the recommender page. If you've already submitted your application, you can go to the website and we have the same questions there. That's what you should have in hand when you sit down and schedule a meeting with them before they write their letter. And that will make it really straightforward for them. Great. Okay, I'm revising my essays in my application. And for the extra essay space, can I delve into a personal identity level shifts? And also, can you touch on some diversity I think maybe organizations in Sloan? So yes, absolutely. In the extra, this is the additional information. It's an optional essay. And there we leave it really open-ended and intentionally open-ended. The hope there is that something that is important to you, to who you are, to us really knowing you as a candidate and as a member of the community, that didn't fit directly into any of the other essays, that you'll be able to fit it in there, right? That you get to choose what you're sharing with us. And so sometimes they are very personal, and that's absolutely okay. And so yes, that would be the space. That would be the space for that. Kind of my recommendation is to tie that into, right? Make sure that it's tying into the larger theme that you're presenting, right? Think of the application as a whole as telling your leadership story, right? Your leadership journey. And so include that in there as well. Make sure it ties in, but absolutely. And then can I touch on some diversity organizations in Sloan? Yeah, within Sloan, we have a whole host of student organizations, a lot that are really well supported by our student experience team and by the student life group at Sloan, and also very much driven by student interest. And so it's a ton of support from the organization and a lot of student interest driven. And so if there's a particular interest group, diversity organization, right? If there's a particular group that you're hoping to tap into or viewpoint that you're hoping to learn about at Sloan, I'm really happy to make introductions to. And you can either DM me or you can write to emba.admissions@mit.edu if you want to follow up on that. Okay. How do the essays look for a lifelong entrepreneur? So I think it's touching on, I think the short answer is the essays are exactly the same, but I think this is touching on a really important topic that Andy broached on a little bit, right? That we have entrepreneurs in our class. And Andy, I think you shared that it was about 10% in the specific, somewhere around 10% in the specific class numbers that we were looking at here.
In the class of 2026, the class was made up of 10% in entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And those are, right, that 10%, those entrepreneurs Andy's talking about are people who are at the time they join the program, their full-time role is an organization that they founded, right? That they founded or that they own. There are other people in the class who have entrepreneurs, who have experience in startups or who have been entrepreneurs in the past, right? Or even have, even have entrepreneurial ventures that are not their main gig. A lot of people wearing multiple hats here. So there's a pretty strong community within our cohort, but then also at MIT as a whole. So something we're really interested in. We do want to see as you're coming into this program that you're in an established role. So if you're in the very early stages of a startup, right? Kind of pre-revenue, pre-organization, pre-operating model, might be a little bit early stage for this program, but there are plenty of places at Sloan, right? There are other opportunities at Sloan if you're, very, very early stage. Okay, great. We've got some more. Let's see. What's the single most important attribute you consistently see in successful applications regularly that doesn't really appear in official admissions materials like the brochures? Interesting question. We really try to be very transparent about what we're looking for and the things that we're paying attention to as in the admissions process. So there there's not um I actually am really struggling to come up with something that is really important to us that we're not talking about. I guess perhaps we don't super explicitly say that, we are looking for you to be a considerate member of the community, but I think we do talk about that in a lot of that might not be on the, 4-point bullet list of qualifications for getting in, but being a considerate member of a community is certainly something we're paying attention to. But good question. We touched on
We question
interviews
on
as
interviews, which I'd be happy to answer because I think
Andy, I
I
love that. Yeah, Andy is
basically
perfect
broke
person to
this
talk
down for a
about
couple
that.
of people earlier today.
Yeah.
So interviews is being a part of the application process. They're part of the admissions process, actually, the phase two, and they're invitation only. You're asking what they look like. Is it a panel of many people or just one person? It is an individual session with one interviewer for about 40 to 45 minutes, a little bit of a break, and a second interview with another interviewer for another 40 to 45 minutes. What we've also started doing is on the day of interviews is there's an optional lunch where you can join one of our students and alumni and ask them questions about their experiences directly within the program. While Sarah and I are great at answering about these statistics and the cohort as a whole and the admissions process, we're not as great at answering questions about what happens on these Go Lab trips or specific modules where you can actually get that information from the students themselves.
Yeah.
What is the ratio of candidates that make it into the interview round? It's hard to say the ratio because the numbers change year over year. But I'd say we probably interview over 60% of the applications that we receive.
All right, good. You all have asked such good questions as we're going, and so I really appreciate this being a dialogue back and forth. Andy, there are a couple of things that people often ask us that I wonder if it would be good for us, one or two FAQs that people have asked a lot. One that I know you get a lot of questions about, Andy, are the transcripts and
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
are the transcripts. And so I wonder, like, what's the piece of confusion you get most often about the transcripts, or yeah, what's the thing that people confuse most about that part of the process?
I think the point of confusion is that they need an official transcript when applying, which is not the case. What we need in the application is a copy of your transcripts to show the courses that you took to prove the quantitative readiness. One of the questions that we get is if it's difficult to receive that transcript, what happens? A lot of times you can get a copy really easily. Once a student is admitted, we then need the official version of that transcript sent directly from a school. And so if you think that part's going to be a little bit difficult, we always recommend starting that a little bit earlier. Some schools can be harder than others to get that transcript from. If you went to an international school, you will need a translation of your transcript copy when you are uploading it to the application. So you'll need the original and the translation. But when you go to the official version, you just need a copy of the original. You don't need to translate it a second time. So I hope that clarifies. But that is really the confusion I hear a lot with the transcripts.
Yeah, okay, good one. Um, I see we have another question in the Q&A about, are there lesser chance, is there less of a chance when the applications are submitted close to the deadline? And I assume you mean closer to that May deadline or the final round. Um, it gets a little the answer is truthfully slightly, but do not let that hold you back. That is, we've been doing this for a lot of years, and so we have a really good sense of kind of the timing and flow. you'll have where what you will have a little bit less choice on maybe are our ability to like move around or get you an interview date that's more convenient to you. So there's a little bit less choice and flexibility on when your interview is. So there's one element that's some slight advantage to applying earlier. In the late round, you might end up, even if you have if you're applying in the late round, you have a really strong application, there's a possibility you'd end up on the wait list. Just if we're having, space constraints, that does happen, but don't let that hold you back. I have seen I've seen amazing people who just happen to not be ready, right? Maybe there's something going on at work. There's a decision that needs to be made around planning for the next year, or they only learn about us pretty close to the deadline, right? And so I've seen amazing people come in on the very last day and submit strong applications and get into the class that year. So don't let that be the thing to hold you back, even though, yes, it is a slightly lesser chance, but that really should not hold you back. There's no penalty if you don't quite get in one year, there is not a penalty for reapplying in a future year. So why proactively say no, right? And kind of prevent the opportunity or possibility for yourself. That's the way I look at it.
I'm unsure if you covered this earlier, but it's also important to think of your own personal timeline when applying, because if you think you might need a math course that's not on your transcripts that to meet our prerequisites, it's important to consider applying in an earlier round just so you have time to figure that out and finish a math course before matriculation, well, before August, really. But
Yeah.
so things like that can also play into the deciding factor of when you submit that application.
Yeah. Okay, good. I know we've covered a lot of ground here. I do want to give just a minute in case you have any final questions, but I think we'll start to wrap up. We've talked about a lot, hopefully given you some things to think about. Uh, there is an opportunity to learn more. We'll have a few more events coming up this year. So on Tuesday, that's next Tuesday, we'll have an online session similar to this, but it's a panel of students and alumni in the sustainability space talking about why they chose MIT and about their experiences here in the executive MBA program. And then we will have on Wednesday, April 1st, we have an Ask Me Anything with Simon Johnson. He's an MIT EMBA faculty member, but he's also, he has a very impressive resume if you want to go through all of the titles, but he's also a 2024 Nobel Economics Prize winner. Really, really impressive. And he's doing an Ask Me Anything where you can join in and talk to him. He'll be talking about kind of current economic events. And then on April 16th, in person on campus, if you want to get a chance to sort of walk through the doors, meet folks on our team and other people in the community here and get a little bit of the experience of sitting in our classroom. That will be April 16th. And that's in time to be able to do that even before the final round. So we've got a lot of exciting events upcoming if you're looking to get to know us even more. And that's all we have for you today. So thank you so much for attending. We have a QR code here. If you have not talked to an admissions advisor yet, I really recommend that as a first step. They can help give advice about where you are in your career and thinking about timing of your application. It's a great first step for everyone in their planning. All right. Have a wonderful night. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining.